I think that users should be guaranteed the kind of execution that they want. And I think the only way to do that is with payment for order flow. So this is where protocols can actually improve things by moving black markets into the white. Where the validators will be able to express preferences. For instance, like don't front run me would be a preference, no front running. And then the builder has to commit to that. The more fragmented the ecosystem is, it means the more variants of security models there are. Because of the structure of sovereign chains in general, most of the MEV that's the most interesting problem in MEV is figuring out how to share it between chains.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Welcome everyone to the Bare Metal Podcast. I've got Sean Braithwaite of Mekatek with me here. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So can you tell us a little more about Mekatek?
So Mekatek was started, I think, in the summer of 2021, when my co-founder and I, Alex and Zimmer, were both working in Core Cosmos. So I was the CTO of Informal Systems, the people working on replicated security. And he was working at Radical, but also spent a lot of time leading the Tendermint team from the engineering side. And I think there were two problems that we were sort of looking at. So one was the problem of incentivization. So this was already like post IBC. So IBC had been launched. It was gaining adoption, both within the Cosmos ecosystem and even outside of the Cosmos ecosystem. It was like not yet sort of like the dominant interoperability protocol, but it was approaching it, let's say. But it had sort of two missing parts that kind of needed to be delayed so this thing could get out the door. One part is incentivization. So IBC as a protocol is, when it was launched, was completely dependent on benevolent, is that the word? Like
benevolence,
benevolent relayers who pay the cost for
out of pocket, right?
They pay out of pocket. At the time, let's just launch it and see how it goes. Turns out running a relayer is quite expensive, especially for validators that are sort of like at the lower end of the voting power scale. So it's usually the larger validators who essentially could finance relaying, usually from delegation. So that was something that was notably missing when we started Mekatek. The second thing that was notably missing when we started Mekatek was like this trade-off between essentially the sovereignty that you get from being a zone in Cosmos versus the synchronous composability that you would have if you're on an ecosystem like Ethereum. Like if you're Ethereum and you want to launch a smart contract, it's completely permissionless. I'm sure it costs like, I don't know, $20,000 to launch a smart contract, but you could do it. And then you could like interop with everyone synchronously. So products like 1inch don't need to collaborate with protocols like Uniswap to deliver value. And that's like fun and interesting. By comparison to Cosmos, right, you get your own chain, you get your own community, your own validator set, your own state machine, you get ABCI, and soon you're going to get ABCI++, which is going to be amazing, but you get asynchronous composability. So if you want to send messages between, say, the Cosmos Hub and Osmosis, it like takes a while. And in that while is like the intersection of varying security models, and at the intersection of varying security models is where MEV stands. So we got very interested in MEV for those two reasons, and then we just decided to do something about it, so we started Mekatek.
So if I understand this correctly, Sean, the design space for MEV exists in this because of this asynchronous nature of IBC.
Exactly. So MEV exists at the intersection of any varying security model. So as soon as you have varying preferences of when things happen, you're going to have MEV. So this happens in IBC in particular because you could, when a transaction is confirmed on one chain, right? Essentially, the chain has committed the user to doing something on another chain through IBC. So you know, like if you initiate a swap on the Cosmos Hub or whatever, that will eventually get executed on Osmosis. The period between when it's originated and when it's executed has preference, right? Someone is going to know, anyone watching the Cosmos Hub can see the initiation of the swap, or what we call the transaction origination. So it's no different than, say, like if you are a wallet and you initiate a transaction and then sell the order flow, or if you're Robinhood and you initiate, the sell of a trade and then sell the trade to Citadel. So instead of, the counterparty.
As has been happening.
Right. I think that's what happens in much more mature markets. Like I think like security markets like Robinhood are very mature. I think markets like Ethereum are very mature, and they have like this difference between transaction origination and there are markets for buying order flow. Cosmos is getting there, but not there. But it is sort of inevitable and unavoidable because of IBC.
Right. I hear a lot of when somebody says MEV or talks about MEV, frequently they mention ideas of sort of blockchain sustainability, right? I mean, securing a sovereign blockchain costs money, and it's not exactly cheap. It's at least tens of thousands of dollars, even for smaller networks per month. What role do you think MEV plays over here?
So I think MEV just plays the role of being part of the overall fiscal policy of the chain. So people say that I think if you're a validator, you would say that MEV is part of the security budget. Like if you're taking that role of like a validator, you'd say like, I deserve this money because I run these nodes, or more importantly, like I participate in governance. So I have to, stay on multiple chains. I'm reading multiple proposals. That's not just like server costs. That's like my costs. That's like my time and my expertise in understanding, where the direction of the chain should go, and like putting like my reputation on the line to vote the right way. I should get paid for that. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is it should be proceeds to LPs. Like if you're a DEX, right, and you have liquidity providers are one other type of users that you have. Traders are another type of users that you have, right? And then there's some fee that goes from the trader to the LP. But then if you're a sandwich bot, right, and you're essentially trading but maliciously, so you're seeing the order flow and then front running and back running a user. So a trader is just trying to execute a swap. You go on both sides of the swap, and effectively you tax that user. So the user gets like a work execution, like maybe 2% or something like that.
User sees the slippage, right?
Yeah, the user, who let's call them grandma, right, gets a worse price. But the sandwich bot gets some proceeds, the validator gets some bribe, and the LPs also get additional fees.
So, right? I mean, let's sort of dig deeper into this and just, go head on. Is MEV good for the ecosystem?
Is MEV good for which ecosystem? So I would say toxic order flow, like as we've written about, it threatens the market, right? Because of this phenomenon called like adverse selection. So this idea that like, if you're a car salesman and you lie about the state of the car, you say, oh yeah, it works fine, and then it doesn't have an engine, right? Maybe one person gets a bad deal. Someone says, But if every or some plurality of car salesmen keep selling bad cars, right, then buyers will stop trusting car salesmen. And then even the good car salesmen, like the people that actually put engine in cars or like leave the engine in, right, will eventually be they'll be washed out of the market because there'll be no legitimate demand because people just don't trust car salesmen.
Right. The
So
market
this
will
is like
break
the
down.
threat.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the threat of toxic order flow, right? So we say that MEV essentially incentivizes toxic order flow. Like if you have like an off-chain auction, like Zenith or something like that, that enables front running. It threatens through by introducing toxic order flow.
So what's the solution to that, right? I mean, like if you introduce these markets, do you somehow also police them, or do you split MEV into different kinds? Like, what do we do here? Because based on what you're saying, if we just let this run, will users want to use those blockchains which involve MEV?
I think that users should be guaranteed the kind of execution that they want. And I think the only way to do that is with payment for order flow. So I think that MEV is application specific. So it's like if you design a DEX a certain way, and it's like you're gonna get sandwiched, right? So it's an application specific concern. If an application decides, like for instance, oh, it doesn't want front running, but it does want arbitrage, right? So it says some application determines that arbitrage is good, but front running is bad. It is sovereignty. It has the full right to do that. That's really up to the chain. What do I think about that personally? I think that what we've seen in this market cycle is that LPs have been annihilated by arbitrage. So most LPs are losing money. A lot of that money is against informed order flow, so arbitrage. So people arbing the bots, arbing pools, right, has the benefit that it gives users better execution, but that happens at the expense of LPs. So the only people who could really determine what the balance is here is the application, because it is zero-sum game. So it just determines, it's a matter of like, do you want to incentivize LPs or traders? Like, and so this is why like MEV in this level is just part of the overall like fiscal policy of the chain of deciding how much does it want for security, how much does it want for emissions, how much does it want from fees, how much does it want for LPs, and just needs it to be governable such that it could avoid like adverse selection.
So if I can summarize what I'm hearing, MEV markets exist. Nobody can, given the nature of IBC, especially in the Cosmos ecosystem and async composability, there is space for MEV. Nobody can, it's really hard to sort of go back from here. So application developers should take this into account when they're building app chains or protocols, in smart contracts, and make sure they understand and they are clear about what kind of MEV is okay or accepted or even possible on their protocol. You think it's on them now to make the best of the world as is?
Well, I think there's things that we can do. I think that so right now MEV is kind of like a black market, right? The mempool, the order of transactions, the mempool, most protocols, not every protocol, but most protocols, let's say most Cosmos protocols, right? The order is undefined, right? So if you look at a block that was ordered a certain way, you don't know why it was ordered that way.
Sure.
So it's impossible to attribute, some front run or some arbitrage or anything to any one party. One idea is like, oh, if there was a user that got sandwiched, maybe it's because the validator who proposed that block was running custom software. That's one idea. Another idea is that some searcher essentially is in the gossip network and just like geolocated their nodes such that they could like feed the proposer at the right time to introduce a sandwich attack, right?
Essentially reverse engineering the pool construction and hoping to hit the right place in the pool.
You could reverse engineer the pool construction if it's worth it.
Some sort of FIFO node local strategy, and whoever's block proposing now.
Exactly. So even if it's FIFO, like if you get the order flow first, and then you introduce your sandwich and then send it, you can sandwich a user. And the problem is when you look at the block, you can't determine whether it was off-chain software or whatever. So this is where protocols can actually improve things by moving black markets into the white, you could actually provide native like on-chain representation of the builder, where people who contribute parts of the block take accountability for it, and they say, "This is what I did." And like if they're first-class citizens, like validators, then you could actually slash the participants who constructed that part of the block or the entirety of the block. So if someone is going to order the transactions, they should make sure that they are accountable and aligned with governance and have something on the line to slash if they violate those community rules.
So it is a pretty complex space with lots of players. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about, what's the architecture, what's the construction of Mekatek? So you said shed light into the, into this block space, let's call it the block space market. Mm-hmm. How does Mekatek do that? Like, do you guys have what components of your system somehow, where could I check, what's going on Osmosis? If somebody's using Mekatek on Osmosis, can I, as like an external user, look in and understand something, or do I have to sign up as a block searcher?
So Mekatek is one of multiple entities that is currently working on like native builder module that will allow essentially outsourcing parts of the block construction to builders. There's a couple of builders in the ecosystem. Mekatek has a builder, it's called Zenith, right? Skip has a builder, I think it's called Satellite. And there are other builders that are coming into the ecosystem to perform multiple tasks like relayers, like incentive aligned relayers would be another construction builder. Mm-hmm. And the goal of this coalition, right, is to provide sort of native integration, so no more custom patches. So instead of integrating, like essentially forking Tendermint and exposing the validator to slower security updates, and all the risk involved with running custom software, it's just going to be a module. Now, the shape and the requirements of that module are still undefined, or there's still a lot of negotiation, but this is the overall intention of the ecosystem to bring the market from the black to the white.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. So on the Tendermint side, in the Tendermint code, there's a proposal for essentially something like something like a standard interface to which multiple types of block builders could sort of connect and partially specify, fully specify a block.
It's going to be on a Cosmos SDK side.
Okay.
It's just going to be a module and will allow you to configure a number of builders, some of which could be local. So it could be a mix of permissioned or like trusted or semi-trusted and untrusted. And you can configure them per validator as long as they are registered on chain.
Did I get that right? That I as a validator could use multiple of these block builders and say switch between them, or like multiplex?
Correct.
Because that's a really interesting idea. I was going to ask, in some sense, the current state of tech means these block builders are exclusive, right? Either you're running patch from Mekatek, but if you also want to run an incentivized IBC, relayer, you can't just run both of these at the same time. There's no composability.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's already solved. Yeah.
Well,
too late to the party.
We are in the process of trying to solve it. I think all of us are looking at this reality. Exactly as you say, there is this problem of running custom patches and it being mutually exclusive. And it not being, it's essentially like a closed market, right? There's not a lot of room for innovation, and it means that validators have to decide one or the other, and it means that they're potentially leaving revenue on the table by monopolizing the block space, right? So it's going to go from monopoly to a diverse market. It's probably better for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, you could have a second level auction, right? For every block, you just choose the best solution from wherever. From whoever is offering to build a block. That sounds pretty cool to me.
You could the validators will be able to express preferences. For instance, like don't front run me would be a preference. No front running. And then the builder has to commit to that.
Sure.
And then if it does not, right, it could be slashed or evicted or whatever.
Okay. And does this module have a name? Like, is there a like working name? Could I find anything about this?
So we're still working on the naming. It's up to the collaborators to decide like what the best name is, working with the Cosmos SDK team. So it's currently under the moniker of like the Builder API. Just keep it neutral. We don't know. I think there's a lot to figure out. So I think this audience is very interesting as an audience of validators, of knowing what the different sort of like constraints and preferences may be, is something that we'd be very interested in doing with the community.
I mean, honestly, one of the most exciting things about this to me is like you don't have to build your own binary, and you don't get this delay, and you don't get this risk from, hey, is my let's say MEV provider or block builder, do they have the patch in time to upgrade to, I don't know, V035 or V046 if it's Cosmos SDK. So that's, I mean, seems like a win for everybody if that happens. So fingers crossed that you guys can get this across the finish line, and just like, that's another level of framework and consistency for this type of market, and inspectability, right? So because it'll be standard, so you can then compare these providers. That's pretty interesting. So I guess that's part of your future plans, helping to standardize this and build out this component. What else is in store from Mekatek?
So essentially, the first parts that we need to build towards this goal of synchronous composability is this sort of builders need to be able to make commitments on chain. Right? They need to be able to commit to something so that they're represented and everyone knows what they did. And in the first version, I think it's like we got to figure out how proposers can make commitments to builders to provide some kind of mutual trust, like bilateral trust, right? So that like I trust you because you committed to something, you trust me because the reverse.
So
the next step,
the underlying problem here is I, as a validator, and putting my reputation on the line by allowing you to build a block that I'm going to place on the
correct.
Network, right? So this is like, I as a validator would be worried, of course, like how do I control what happens in this block? Like somebody's going to suggest
exactly.
I have to place it. Software won't allow me to do anything else. So you want to build some sort of framework around here. So the proposer can express, I'll do A, B, and C, log that on chain, and then if they violate these, let's say, self-imposed rules or mutually agreed upon rules, the validator would have a possibility of slashing them, or essentially the code, like the framework that you guys are building, would slash the block proposer.
So in the first version, the trust model is between the proposer and the builder. So the builder needs to know, like, should I blacklist this proposer? So if I like give them a bundle of MEV and they steal it, they decide, oh, actually, they do run custom software. They don't have to, but they decide to run custom software, at which they take the transactions that the builder provides to them, then reorders them to reconfigure the addresses to send whatever, to steal them
to themselves or whatever, right?
Exactly. So the builder needs to know like what to do in that case. Like, how do you abdicate that case? Like, do you have some kind of evidence? Like, who do you prove to that something went wrong?
It's your bundle.
What
right?
recourse? What recourse do you have? So like builders, I think in Cosmos generally, these kind of systems are more going to be governed by social norms than economics. I think that there is going to be like, I asked Flashbots like how much MEV stealing they saw, how many like time batted attacks they were seeing, and actually it's less often than you think. It's actually, that's how usually the system works, but that doesn't mean you don't need accountability. And I think you do need accountability on both sides, and that accountability is going to come from these commitments. So like the builder module's goal is to create commitments between proposers and builders, and they're just like bilateral. The next step after that is to figure out how, instead of like proposers making individual commitments to a builder, how like an entire chain could make a commitment to a builder, and then how that would be guaranteed, or how the risk would be underwritten by the entire chain instead of being borne by just the proposer.
But also, would you expect, let's say, an entire chain sort of voting putting up a governance proposal, say, we don't want anybody to front run on this chain. Do you think that should be possible? Is that something you guys want to allow,
Yeah.
and then sort of all of it? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't think, I think chains are very concerned about front running. I think we do analysis. So we actually look at what runs through our system. Actually, we look at we look at the data of what runs through all the chains, whether we construct the blocks or not. And what we found is what we assumed, like our hypothesis going in was that there was going to be front running specifically during the Terra collapse, that like slippage was going to be higher, that people would run sandwich bots because there actually is a patch, like a prototype of a sandwich bot Tendermint fork, right? It is technically possible to do it. The question is, did anyone do it? And the answer is like, not really. Not really. Even when there was like significant amount of money on the line, people did not front run. Now, I don't think that's going to be guaranteed always and forever. Like, I think as the market matures, that people will pursue different opportunities. And I do think that chains are very concerned about this. I know that Osmosis is very concerned about front running. This is why they want to, they're going to essentially do pre-commit privacy that will prevent front running is their intentions. And we know that DYDX is very concerned with front running as well, because it affects their users a certain way. So we think this is going to be a preference that a lot of chains are going to express. And like the role of Mekatek as like, infrastructure providers is to provide these facilities through protocols.
Right. We've talked a lot about IBC here as the underlying primitive that allows for all of this, but assuming IBCs there also requires a future with sovereign chains that are actually going to interact through IBC, right? I mean, there are other contenders in the space for the future of Cosmos, and one of those is Dimension, one of those is Saga, who propose sort of like a, let's say, more synchronous. They have like Dimension has their own version of IBC, which runs between the different rollups. So they might sort of close off parts of that ecosystem. So what do you think what do you see in the future of Cosmos? And are there going to be sovereign chains? Are there going to be enough sovereign chains?
I think that forking IBC, I think IBC should evolve. And I think it's a great base. And there's space to grow. And Mekatek is committed to that growth. I think with the Saga, Celestia, Dimensions, replicated security from the hub, I think mesh security, what you're going to see broadly is like right now the cost of security is very, very high. So if you're like an application, doing validator set formation is very expensive, and it's almost like a moat, right? So if you could like get to that point where you have the most security, even if your application is not the best, you have a moat, which is the amount of security. I think that what this means is like if any one of these solutions succeed, essentially the cost of security is going to go to zero. It's going to be very, very cheap to get that security in Cosmos, whether it's through IBC or something like it. And I think that is going to create innovation, that applications are going to have to compete on merit instead of use the moat of security. And I think that's fantastic for the ecosystem.
Okay. And how would that affect sort of MEV? If suddenly you have these chains inside like a Dimension, ecosystem with rollups in there, or I guess on Saga, they'd still be connected through IBC, right? So I don't think there's much difference.
So the more fragmented the ecosystem is, it means the more variants of security models there are, which means if these rollups are used, then there'll be more MEV. I think that would be the most obvious take. Another thing that we sort of foresee is that like because of the structure of sovereign chains in general, most of the MEV that's the most interesting problem in MEV is figuring out how to share it between chains. Mm-hmm. So trying to figure out not just like, step one, figure out how to pay LPs, stakers. Actually, step one is just pay stakers, then validators and community pool, ideally, LPs, whatever. Actually make that possible. So structure the market such that it's actually possible to pay the people who create value, right? Step two is to figure out how that's spread between communities. Like if all these software communities are, like if you originate a transaction on the Cosmos Hub that's executed on Osmosis that generates like $10,000 in MEV, who deserves that MEV? Is it the Osmosis community or the Cosmos Hub?
And who decides?
And who decides?
Who decides, right? Yeah, so lots of interesting problem.
Yeah.
In the future. So lots of work for you guys to do and figure out, right?
Well, I mean, we're doing it out. We're trying to do it out in the open as a community, to be sort of as transparent as possible about our intentions and make sure that the market is open such that we could all learn together is really the goal.
What do I need to do to start, if I want to test Mekatek out? Like, how does that work if I'm a validator and I want to see what's up?
You go to mecha.tech and you read our thesis and see how much of our vision is aligned with your values. And then you click on Zenith. And there's a very simple tutorial on playing with the patch. That would be one way to start participating in our community effort.
So what chains are you guys active on?
Osmosis, Juno, and Evmos. But I think the intention is that we're really focused on the Builder API and standardizing it, and then moving it through chain governance than we are about propagating the thing. You'd see Zenith as sort of like a learning experience to get the kind of feedback that we needed to design better protocols.
And when you mentioned the networks, are we talking testnets or mainnets?
Both. We just launch on.
We're both on testnets on mainnet. So if I was a validator, I could still test it out on a testnet, no risk, understand what's up, and then see if I want to roll out on mainnet.
Yeah, play with it. I think there's interesting innovation on both like the supply and demand side. So as a validator, learning about different ways to monetize block space, and then on the demand side, it's interesting to see integrations with like payment for order flow stuff, where people can start paying relayers for backrunning.
Right. Okay. So lots of interesting tasks ahead of you guys. So I guess that's a great place to stop the podcast. So I want to say thanks very much for coming on and telling us about Mekatek.
Thank you for having me.
And hope to see you here again soon.
Yeah, it was great to be here.
All right. Good luck.
All right. Cool. Thank you.